And I'm confident because we've been here before. You know, we've seen this movie before. It's got some scary parts, I know. But in the end, the good guys win this movie. Think back, the last time we saw this movie, 1977, right? Republicans are out of power. Party's reputation is absolutely devastated. Worse than today. Devastated by Watergate, by what was really a failed Ford administration. Then, as now, Democrats were in control of complete elected government in Washington, had control of most state legislatures, most governorships, and the Republicans looked like the permanent minority party. Then, as now, we had an inexperienced, untested, liberal Democrat as president. Then, as now, our economy was in a crisis, and the Democrats were calling for higher taxes, more spending as the solution to the crisis. Is this sounding familiar? And then, as now, there were voices suggesting that Republicans needed to find a way to go along and get along and work with the Democrats and be more like the Democrats, because the alternative would be political oblivion. Thank God our party rejected that false choice, and instead we offered an alternative that was a hopeful vision based on the founding principles of our country and the founding principles of our party. It was based on limited government, lower taxes, less spending, personal responsibility, traditional social and cultural values, defense of American sovereignty. Those were the ideas that were the alternative. And 4 years later, as we know, a Republican won a landslide electoral victory. And when Ronald Reagan implemented those principles during his presidency, he restored the confidence of what had been a broken nation, restored the vitality of the economy, and he paved the way for what became Republican majorities in the early 90s. I would argue that today's situation is actually less bleak than the situation we faced in 1977. And if we could come back then, we can come back now. We can come back in Washington. I think actually that 2010 is going to be a very good year for Republican candidates across the country. I think we've got a shot at taking back the House in 2010. But we're only going to do it if American people believe that the Republican candidates are committed to Republican ideas and Republican values. Right. Here in Pennsylvania, I think we can bring these ideals to Harrisburg, and we can win. We can win the governorship, and we can take back control of the State House. But we need leadership in Harrisburg that's willing to take on what's wrong with Harrisburg. The bloat, the waste, the corruption, wherever it is, in either political party, regardless of position. We need leadership that understands we cannot tax and spend our way to prosperity in Pennsylvania any more than we can out of Washington. We need leadership that understands that every dollar that the government spends is a dollar that's coming out of the pocket of a hard-working Pennsylvania citizen, and treats that very cautiously and with restraint and respect. We need leadership that understands that, especially in tough economic times, the last thing Pennsylvanians need is more spending and more taxes. And I just think we need leadership in Harrisburg that wakes up every morning and asks themselves, how can I make Pennsylvania the best state in America to raise a family, to get a job, to start a business, to grow this economy, to get back on track. Now, some of you may know, I'm seriously considering running for governor of this Commonwealth. I'm thinking of doing this because I believe that I can bring about the kind of reforms that can help get Pennsylvania growing again and restore the confidence of the people of Pennsylvania in the integrity of its government. And those two things are very, very important. But to do that, a leader's got to be willing to stand up to really anyone who's standing in the way. Any special interest, anybody in any political party, any powerful person who's standing in the way of those kind of reforms, you've got to be willing to challenge those kinds of folks. And I think I've demonstrated a willingness and an ability to stand up to some pretty powerful people and interests in both parties. if I do decide to run, I won't be able to accomplish anything alone. I'll need your help. Certainly, I'll need your help on the campaign trail, but even more importantly, in office, I'll need your help. I'll need your help to make sure we're holding the other politicians' feet to the fire, hold me accountable for advancing the values that we share. But with your help, I'm sure that the Republican Party can restore its credibility and return to these principles and be very successful. As I say, I've got a lot of confidence in the future of our country, in the future of the conservative movement, in the future of our Commonwealth, because I've seen in the past when our nation has been able to rise to the challenge, when our state's been able to rise, and when we've risen from the ashes. Remember the story. Ronald Reagan is a great hero of mine, so I will invoke his history one more time. You know, in 1976, Ronald Reagan challenged the sitting president of the United States for the Republican nomination for president. He started off by losing 5 consecutive primaries to President Ford, and the press said he was finished. 9 of his fellow Republican governors issued an open letter calling for him to step out of the race. Even some in his own campaign told him it was time to throw in the towel. Reagan wouldn't give up. He goes to North Carolina, and he wins 52-46. Then goes on to Texas, and he wins in Texas. Now he's on a roll, and he starts winning races. He takes this nomination battle right to the floor in Kansas City at the convention. And as we know, battled it right down to the wire, and narrowly lost. And Gerald Ford prevailed. In his farewell speech to his campaign staff, Reagan told them as follows. He said, "Don't get cynical. Realize that there are millions and millions of Americans out there who want what you want and want this country to be a shining city on a hill." He told them, sure, there's disappointment in what happened, but the cause goes on. In the face of a crushing defeat, Ronald Reagan was not crushed. And we know what happened 4 years later. Ronald Reagan never gave up, and neither must we. Like you, I'm terribly disappointed in what happened last fall in the elections, and I'm terribly disappointed by some of the things that are happening in Washington. But we've got to remember, there are millions of Pennsylvanians and many millions of Americans who believe what we believe, and they want what we want. And so the cause goes on. Thank you very much.